Commander Vextar had seen more worlds than most beings could count in 10 lifetimes. His insect-like body, covered in a natural armor that gleamed silver-blue under starlight, had carried him across the galaxy, mapping new territories for the Alliance. Today was supposed to be just another routine survey mission. Earth looked boring from space, a small blue marble spinning quietly around an average star. The humans living there had only managed to reach their own moon a few decades ago. Nothing special about them at all. Vextar's 6 eyes studied the readouts on his control panel as his scout ship glided through Earth's upper atmosphere. The vessel was sleek and deadly, built like a metal predator with wings that could slice through space itself. Its hull shimmered with energy shields that made it nearly invisible to human detection systems. The commander's 4 arms moved gracefully over the controls, each hand performing a different task with practiced ease. Everything changed in an instant. A massive wave of cosmic radiation, invisible and silent, swept across Earth's solar system like a tsunami of pure energy. It happened without warning, a solar storm far more powerful than anything the Alliance databases had predicted. The radiation hit Vextar's ship like a hammer blow, frying every electronic system in seconds. Sparks exploded from control panels as the ship's quantum core began to overload. Warning lights bathed the cockpit in angry red as alarms shrieked in a dozen different alien languages. Vextar's compound eyes widened in terror as he realized what was happening. The ship's main reactor, designed to power faster than light travel, was going critical. Without the stabilizing systems, it would explode with enough force to level entire cities. The graceful vessel became a falling stone. Gravity grabbed it with merciless hands and dragged it toward the surface. Vextar's body, evolved on a world with much lighter gravity, felt like it was being crushed by invisible weights. His breathing became labored as the ship spun out of control, tumbling through clouds that looked like white cotton from space, but felt like concrete walls when his vessel smashed through them. Through his failing sensors, Vextar caught glimpses of the landscape rushing up to meet him, mountains covered in green forests, rivers that twisted like silver snakes, and small human settlements that looked like toys from this height. He tried desperately to steer away from populated areas, using the last of his ship's power to aim for what looked like empty wilderness. The ship carved through the forest like a burning knife, snapping ancient trees like matchsticks. It hit the mountainside with a sound like thunder, gouging a smoking scar across the landscape before finally coming to rest in a crater of its own making. Steam rose from the wreckage as metal that had traveled between stars now lay broken and twisted among Korean pine trees. Kim Hana was 19 years old and loved being alone in the mountains. She had been hiking the same trails since she was a child, following paths that her grandfather had shown her decades ago. The forest was her escape from the crowded cities below, a place where she could think clearly and breathe fresh air that didn't taste like car exhaust. She carried a simple backpack with water, some rice balls her mother had made, and a camera to capture the beauty she found in hidden valleys. When the sky turned purple above her, Hana thought at first that she was seeing the northern lights in the wrong place. But the light was wrong, too bright, too violent, and moving in ways that natural phenomena never moved. Then she saw the object falling, trailing fire like a meteor, but far too large and far too controlled to be a space rock. The impact shook the ground beneath her feet. Birds exploded from the trees in panic, and small animals fled in every direction. The sound echoed off the mountains like the world itself was breaking. Every instinct Hana had developed during years of hiking alone in dangerous terrain told her to run away, to put as much distance as possible between herself and whatever had just crashed into the valley below. Instead, she found herself walking toward the smoke. The wreckage was unlike anything she had ever seen. The ship's hull was made of some material that seemed to shift color in the flickering light of small fires that had started in the surrounding trees. Strange symbols covered its surface, and parts of it seemed to flow like liquid metal even though it was clearly solid. The crash had torn open sections of the vessel, revealing corridors that were too tall and too wide for human use. Hana called out in Korean, then in broken English, hoping that whoever was inside might understand. Her voice echoed strangely in the alien corridors as she carefully picked her way through twisted metal and sparking electronics. The air smelled wrong, not just smoke and burning, but something chemical and foreign that made her nose sting. She found Commander Vextar pinned under a support beam that had collapsed during the crash. His appearance was shocking, clearly not human, with multiple arms and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. Green blood, thick as syrup, pooled around his broken body. But despite his alien features, Hana could see pain and intelligence in those strange eyes. The universal translator, damaged but still functioning, crackled to life with a sound like breaking glass. When Vexitar spoke, his words came out in accented but understandable Korean. "Small human," he said, his voice weak but urgent. "You must flee this place immediately. My ship's reactor is destabilizing. In just a few minutes it will explode, with enough force to consume your mountains and your cities. You cannot help me, and there is no time to save anyone." Hana looked around the alien command center and felt her mind struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. The walls weren't really walls at all. They were covered in screens that seemed to float in the air without any visible support. Colors she had never seen before pulsed and shifted across these displays, showing information in symbols that looked more like living creatures than writing. Some of the symbols were moving, crawling across the screens like digital insects, while others pulsed with urgent red light that clearly meant danger. The ship groaned around them like a wounded animal. Metal creaked and sparked, and somewhere deep in the vessel's belly she could hear a sound like a massive heartbeat getting faster and more irregular. Each beat sent vibrations through the floor that she could feel in her bones. The air itself seemed to be getting thicker and more electric, making the hair on her arms stand up. What scared her most was the countdown. Even though she couldn't read the alien numbers, she could see them changing, getting smaller, racing toward what could only be 0. The pattern was unmistakable. Something bad was going to happen when those symbols stopped moving, and it was going to happen soon. "Then teach me how to fix it," Hana said, and she was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Inside, her heart was pounding like a drum, but somehow her words came out calm and determined. Maybe it was shock. Or maybe it was the same stubborn streak that had made her climb down toward a crashed alien ship instead of running away like a sensible person would have done. Commander Vexitar made a sound that the translator turned into laughter, but it was the kind of laughter that had no joy in it at all. It sounded like metal grinding against metal, like machinery breaking down. His multiple eyes fixed on her with what might have been pity or admiration. She couldn't tell which. "Impossible, small human," he said, and she could hear pain making, his voice weaker with every word. "This vessel requires direct neural interface with Alliance biotechnology. The pilot must connect their mind directly to the ship's computer systems. Your primitive brain could never handle such a connection. Your species hasn't evolved the neural pathways necessary to process quantum-level calculations in real time." But Hana was already moving. She grabbed Vextar under his arms, all 4 of them, and started dragging him toward what looked like the most important part of the command center. The alien commander was incredibly heavy, even though the ship's artificial gravity made everything feel slightly lighter than it should. His insect-like body was dense with muscle and chitin armor that had probably saved his life during the crash. Every step was a struggle. Vextar's weight made her muscles scream, and his strange body shape made it hard to get a good grip. Green blood from his wounds left a trail behind them as they moved through corridors that were clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. The ceiling was too high, the doorways too wide, and everything felt slightly wrong in a way that made her dizzy. "You don't understand," Vextar said as she dragged him along. "When I say impossible, I mean it in the most literal sense. The neural interface requires specific brain structures that your species simply doesn't possess. It would be like asking a fish to breathe air or a bird to swim in the deepest ocean trenches." "Try me," Hana replied, not stopping her struggle to move him. She had always been stubborn. Her mother complained about it constantly, saying that once Hana made up her mind about something, it was easier to move a mountain than to change her opinion. Right now she was grateful for that stubborn streak. The rational part of her mind was screaming that this was insane, that she should leave the alien and save herself. But the larger part of her, the part that had always refused to give up on anything, kept her moving forward. The neural interface chair looked like something from a nightmare. It was built for Vextar's insectoid body, with slots and curves that matched his alien anatomy. Multiple arms extended from its sides, ending in what looked like crystalline headsets connected by cables that pulsed with their own internal light. The whole thing hummed with energy that made her teeth ache just by being near it. Hana stared at the chair for a moment, trying to figure out how to make her human body fit into something designed for a completely different species. The seat was too deep, the back too tall, and the armrest positioned for someone with 4 arms instead of 2. But she had spent years adapting to situations that weren't quite right, using equipment designed for taller people, squeezing into spaces that were too small, making do with whatever was available. She forced herself into position, wedging her body into the alien chair as best she could. The crystalline headset hung above her like a crown made of living light. Up close, she could see that it wasn't really solid at all. It seemed to be made of some kind of energy held together in the shape of crystal, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The bioconnectors aren't compatible with human neural pathways, Vexistar warned, his voice getting weaker as more green blood seeped from his wounds. The feedback could stop your heart instantly, or worse, it could burn out your brain completely, leaving your body alive but your mind gone forever. Hana looked at the countdown displays around them. Even without being able to read the alien numbers, she could see they were running out of time. The ship's groaning was getting louder, and new alarms had started wailing in frequencies that hurt her ears. "Then you better talk fast," she said, reaching for the crystalline headset with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be. The crystalline headset felt cold against Hana's skin, like touching ice in the middle of winter. But that was nothing compared to what happened the moment it made full contact with her skull. It was as if someone had opened a door in her mind that she never knew existed, and through that door came a flood of sensations so intense, it nearly knocked her unconscious. Ice seemed to pour directly into her brain, freezing every thought she had ever had. For a terrifying moment, Hana couldn't remember her own name, couldn't remember where she was or why she was sitting in this strange chair. Her vision went completely white, and she felt like she was falling through empty space, even though she knew she was still sitting down. Then something incredible happened. Her consciousness exploded outward like a balloon suddenly inflated to 1,000 times its normal size. She was no longer just Hana sitting in a chair. She was the entire ship. She could feel every corridor, every damaged panel, every sparking wire as if they were parts of her own body. It was like suddenly growing 1,000,000 new limbs and having to learn how to use them all at once. Through the ship's external sensors, she could see the forest around them with perfect clarity. She could count individual leaves on trees hundreds of meters away, could feel the warmth of small animals hiding in the underbrush, could even sense the electromagnetic fields generated by her own human brain. The ship's sensors were so advanced that they made human senses seem like trying to see the world through a dirty window. But it was the reactor that dominated her expanded awareness. Deep in the ship's core, she could feel it like a second heart beating inside her chest. Except this heart was sick and getting sicker by the second. The containment field that normally kept the reactor's incredible energy safely contained was failing, breaking down layer by layer like ice melting in the sun. She could see the countdown now, and it wasn't just numbers on a screen anymore. It was a countdown to her own death and the death of everything for kilometers around. 4 minutes and 17 seconds. The numbers burned in her mind with crystal clarity. The ship's systems immediately began fighting her presence like an immune system attacking a foreign virus. Warning signals flooded her consciousness in languages that had been spoken on worlds she had never heard of. Computer programs designed by alien minds tried to reject her human neural patterns, treating her thoughts as errors that needed to be corrected or deleted. But Hana had grown up poor in a world where nothing ever worked the way it was supposed to. Her family's old computer had been held together with tape and prayers, crashing at least once a day and requiring constant coaxing to do even simple tasks. Their television had needed a specific combination of hitting and sweet-talking to get a clear picture. Even her phone was a hand-me-down that had its own mysterious quirks and moods. She had learned patience from years of dealing with stubborn, broken technology, Instead of trying to force the alien systems to obey her, she began to work with them, finding ways around their objections rather than trying to override them completely. When one system rejected her commands, she found another pathway. When a program refused to accept her input, she found a way to translate her thoughts into something it could understand. "Extraordinary," she heard Vextar whisper, though his voice seemed to come from very far away. Her physical body felt distant and unimportant compared to her expanded consciousness that now filled the entire ship. "Your brain is creating new, neural pathways in real time, adapting to technology that is centuries beyond your civilization's understanding." Hana could feel what he was talking about. Inside her skull, she could sense new connections forming between neurons, her brain literally rewiring itself to handle information it had never been designed to process. It should have been impossible. Human brains weren't supposed to be able to change this quickly. But somehow, under the incredible pressure of the situation, her mind was evolving at a speed that defied everything scientists thought they knew about human biology. Blood began to trickle from her nose as the strain of the neural interface pushed her brain beyond its normal limits. She could taste copper on her lips, could feel pressure building behind her eyes that threatened to split her skull open. Every second that passed made the connection more difficult to maintain, like trying to hold on to a live electrical wire that was slowly cooking her from the inside. The alien systems were designed for minds that could process information in quantum layers, thinking about multiple possibilities simultaneously, calculating probabilities across dimensional boundaries that human mathematics couldn't even describe. Vextar's species had evolved to think in ways that were fundamentally different from human thought, processing data in patterns that looked more like poetry than logic to Hana's linear human mind. But slowly, impossibly, she began to understand. It was like learning to see colors that had never existed before, or learning to hear music in frequencies that human ears weren't meant to detect. The ship's systems stopped fighting her quite so hard as her brain adapted to their requirements. She found ways to think in quantum layers, holding multiple contradictory ideas in her mind at the same time without going insane. Power flickered back to the propulsion systems like a candle being lit in a dark room. It wasn't much, barely enough to lift the ship off the ground, but it was something. For the first time since the crash, Hana felt a tiny spark of hope growing in her chest. 3 minutes and 42 seconds remained on the countdown, and she was just getting started. With 2 minutes and 8 seconds left on the countdown, Hana made a decision that went against every safety protocol the alien ship had ever been programmed with. She was going to fly this massive vessel straight up into the sky, despite having never piloted anything more complex than her grandfather's old fishing boat on the lake near her village. The ship groaned like a giant waking up from a deep sleep as she forced power into the main engines. Through her neural connection, she could feel every bolt and rivet protesting as systems that had been damaged in the crash suddenly came back to life. The vessel had been designed to rise gracefully from landing pads on civilized worlds, not to blast off from a crater in the middle of a forest while half its systems were broken and sparking. But somehow, impossibly, it began to rise. Trees that had stood for centuries fell away beneath them as the ship clawed its way up through the air. Ancient pines that had weathered countless storms were flattened by the engine wash, creating a perfect circle of devastation around the crater. The sound was incredible, like thunder that never stopped, echoing off the mountains and probably being heard in villages dozens of kilometers away. Hana's physical body was pressed back into the alien chair by acceleration forces that made her feel like she weighed twice as much as normal. Her ribs ached with every breath, and she could taste more blood in her mouth as the neural strain continued to push her brain beyond its limits. But through the ship's sensors, she could see the ground falling away beneath them, and that gave her the strength to keep going. The vessel climbed unsteadily, fighting both Earth's gravity and her complete lack of experience. She had learned to interface with the ship's computer systems, but actually flying the thing was like trying to perform surgery while riding a roller coaster. Every movement she made sent the ship lurching in directions she hadn't intended. When she tried to go straight up, it veered to the left. When she corrected for that, it rolled to the right and nearly went into a spin that would have torn it apart. "I need to reach space," she said through gritted teeth. though she wasn't sure if she was talking to Vextar or to herself. Her voice sounded strange and distant even to her own ears, as if it was coming from someone else entirely. If this thing explodes in the atmosphere, the shock wave will level everything for hundreds of kilometers. Through her expanded consciousness, she could feel the reactor getting more unstable with every second that passed. It was like having a bomb inside her chest, ticking down to zero while she raced against time itself. The containment field was breaking down faster now, stressed by the ship's acceleration and the damage from the crash. She could actually see the energy barriers flickering like candle flames in the wind. 1 minute and 37 seconds. The ship lurched violently as she pushed it past safe atmospheric velocities. Human aircraft were never meant to go this fast, so low in the atmosphere. The air was too thick, creating friction that heated the hull to dangerous temperatures. But this wasn't a human aircraft. It was an alien vessel built to travel between stars, and even damaged, it had capabilities that Earth's most advanced jets could never match. Warning signals flooded her expanded consciousness in a dozen different alien languages. She couldn't understand the words, but their meaning was crystal clear. Structural failure imminent. The ship's hull was heating up beyond safe limits. Stress fractures were appearing in critical support beams. The engines were running at 110% of their rated capacity and climbing, but she kept pushing higher. At 30 kilometers altitude, they broke through the thickest part of Earth's atmosphere. The ship's motion became smoother as the air thinned out, though it was still shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Through the external cameras, Hana could see the curve of the Earth beginning to appear below them, a sight that no human had ever seen from this angle before. 50 kilometers, 60, 70. At 80 kilometers altitude, with only seconds left, on the countdown, Hana faced the hardest choice of her life. She could keep climbing, trying to reach the vacuum of space where an explosion would be harmless to Earth but might destroy satellites that billions of people depended on for communication and navigation. Or she could do something that every instinct told her was completely insane. The ship's computer offered her the standard emergency protocol: eject the reactor core and let it explode safely in space. But Hana's human brain, still adapting to alien technology in real time, saw a third option that the computer's programming had never considered. Instead of ejecting the reactor, she used the ship's remaining power to create a controlled implosion. It was like trying to make a bomb explode backward, containing all that incredible energy and forcing it to collapse in on itself, rather than expanding outward. The mathematics involved were so complex that even the alien computer system struggled to process them. But somehow her hybrid human-alien consciousness made it work. For one brilliant moment, the ship became a new star in Earth's upper atmosphere. The explosion was visible across 3 countries, lighting up the night sky like a second sun. People stopped in the streets to stare up at the impossible light, not knowing that they were witnessing a 19-year-old Korean girl saving their world with technology she barely understood. But the explosion was contained, harmless to everything, except the ship itself. The vessel simply vanished in a flash of light that was beautiful rather than destructive. The escape pod that carried Hana and Vextar back to the mountainside was tiny compared to the massive ship, but it was built to survive anything. It fell through the atmosphere like a shooting star, its heat shields glowing cherry red as it descended toward the forest where this incredible journey had begun. When rescue teams from both worlds eventually found them 3 days later, they discovered something unprecedented. A human who had successfully flown an alien starship, and an alien commander who had witnessed the impossible becoming routine in the hands of Earth's most stubborn species. 6 months after the crash that changed everything, Kim Hana stood in a room that shouldn't have existed. The Galactic Alliance Council chamber was located on a space station orbiting Jupiter, built from materials that didn't follow the normal rules of physics. The walls seemed to be made of crystallized starlight, shifting between colors that human eyes had never been designed to see. The ceiling stretched up so high that it disappeared into what looked like actual outer space, complete with slowly moving stars and nebulae. Hana wore a simple black suit that her mother had bought for her back in Seoul, looking almost comically ordinary among beings who had evolved on worlds with different gravities, different atmospheres, and different definitions of what life could be. But she felt more confident than she had any right to feel, standing before representatives of civilizations that had been traveling between stars when humans were still discovering fire. The neural interface experience had changed her in ways that scientists were still trying to understand. Her brain scans looked like nothing doctors had ever seen before. New neural pathways had formed in impossible configurations, creating connections between parts of her mind that had never been linked before. She could look at complex mathematical equations and understand them intuitively, without needing to work through the calculations step by step. Quantum mechanics, which had baffled Earth's greatest physicists for over a century, made perfect sense to her now. But the strangest change was how she saw patterns everywhere. In the way crowds moved through subway stations, in the flight paths of birds, in the seemingly random fluctuations of stock markets, she could see underlying structures that revealed themselves like hidden pictures in puzzle books. Her professors at Seoul National University had started bringing her problems that had stumped entire research departments, and she would solve them in minutes by seeing connections that no one else could perceive. Commander Vextar stood at the center of the council chamber, his forearms gesturing as he delivered his report to beings from across the galaxy. His injuries from the crash had healed completely, leaving only faint scars on his silver-blue carapace. The Alliance's medical technology had repaired his broken bones and torn organs, but nothing could repair his shattered assumptions about what primitive species were capable of achieving. "Honored representatives," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. 6 months ago, I would have told you that humans were nothing more than another young species playing with basic chemistry and crude metal tools. I was wrong in ways that challenge everything we thought we understood about biological evolution and technological development. The assembled aliens listened with various degrees of interest and skepticism. There were beings made of living crystal who communicated through light patterns, gas creatures who existed as organized clouds of intelligent particles, and mechanical entities whose consciousness had been transferred into synthetic bodies eons ago. Many of them had encountered thousands of species during their long expansions across the galaxy, and few had impressed them enough to warrant special attention. The human female you see before you, Vextar continued, gesturing toward Hana, successfully interfaced with technology that should have killed her instantly. More than that, she adapted to it, learned to control it, and used it to save not only my life but potentially hundreds of thousands of lives on her homeworld. She did this with no training, no preparation, and neural pathways that had never been designed for such integration. A representative from the Crystalline Consortium, whose body looked like a living diamond sculpture, projected skeptical light patterns. Adaptation under stress is not uncommon among young species. Many civilizations show surprising resourcefulness when faced with extinction. This was not mere resourcefulness, Vextar replied firmly. I watched her brain create new neural pathways in real time, restructuring itself to handle information processing methods that took my species millions of years to evolve. She didn't just survive contact with our technology, she mastered it and improved upon our own emergency protocols. Hana stepped forward when the council's attention turned to her. Speaking to beings from across the galaxy should have been terrifying, but the neural changes had given her a strange calm that she had never possessed before. She could see the patterns in their behavior, understand the underlying currents of politics and curiosity that moved through the chamber like invisible rivers. 6 months ago, I was just a college student who liked hiking in the mountains, she said, her voice steady and clear. I had never seen a spaceship, never imagined that life existed beyond Earth, never dreamed that I would be standing here talking to beings from other worlds. But when I found Commander Vextar's ship crashing in my forest, I had a choice to make. She paused, looking around at the alien faces, some familiar in their basic structure, others so foreign that she couldn't even guess how they perceived the world around them. I could have run away. Every rational part of my mind was screaming at me to save myself and let the authorities handle it. But humans don't always choose the rational path. We choose the path that feels right, even when it seems impossible. Especially when it seems impossible. A representative from the Machine Collective, its synthetic voice perfectly modulated, asked, And what do you believe this means for future human-alliance relations? Hana smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like the 19-year-old college student she had been before the crash. It means you're going to find us very interesting neighbors. We're not the most advanced species, and we're certainly not the wisest. But we're stubborn, we're curious, and we refuse to accept that anything is truly impossible until we've tried it ourselves. Commander Vextar nodded approvingly. Humans don't just survive impossible situations, he added. They adapt to them, master them, and then find ways to make them routine. This species will reshape everything we know about biological limitations and technological integration. As the council session continued, Hana found herself thinking about home. Sol seemed like a different world now, full of people who still thought humans were alone in the universe. Soon, that would change. Scientists and diplomats from dozens of worlds were already making plans to visit Earth, eager to study the species that had produced such an unlikely ambassador. The age of human expansion among the stars had begun, not with grand declarations or military conquest, but with a Korean college student who had refused to accept the word impossible when it mattered most. And as Hana looked out at the representatives of dozens of civilizations, she knew that this was just the beginning of humanity's greatest adventure.